I just wanted to know if you can just give us any information on how many gangs are currently operating in Cape Town, and which one of those would you think is the more influential among them?
Look, the exact number of gangs operating on the Cape Flats, we don't know. We could have told you that a few years ago when the old gang unit estimated numbers. But I must say to you now that we actually don't know because there was a defragmentation of some of the bigger gangs. Some of the smaller gangs are being swallowed by new formations, particularly the Fancy Boys gang. And we have a situation on the Cape Flats where at the moment the Fancy Boys are in the ascendancy, and it's uncanny because they are taking on all the other gangs. And I think that that is as a result of the leadership losses that some of the bigger gangs, the Americans, the Hard Livings, Terrible Justice, and so forth, had. A lot of the leaders were initially jailed and then they were executed by PAGAD, the People Against Gangsterism and Drugs. And so that leadership vacuum that was created there coincided with the release of some of the senior leaders of the Fancy Boys. In 2008, 2007, the entire leadership of the Fancy Boys gang were jailed because of an investigation undertaken by police detectives led by, I think, then General Vieri. And the Prevention of Organized Crime Act was used successfully, I think, to jail the gang for racketeering purposes. And a lot of them have been released on appeal. In 2008, there was an appeal, and they won the appeal. Shamil Isian, and he set about rebuilding the gang as a result, and building new alliances, creating opportunities for them to collect and sell firearms. So they've been able to arm themselves very, very, very well. And at the moment, they're fighting with almost every other gang in most of the Cape Flats communities.
When we grew up, we basically thought of these gangs as like very local. Like we grew up in like Ottery. So we had like, Bobby Mongrel on the other side of the canal. And on our side, it was the Eurocats with their sort of misspelled name. And then there was the Jesters, but it was very kind of territorial, very local. That's not what we're talking about now. Because when you were also saying about the biggest, I was also thinking, if I'm reading the press from here, I'm also noticing these gangs are like they popping up around extortion in like the city center, in the downtown, in the tourist section of the city, which I didn't think about gangs that way. They're involved in, there's court cases around housing contracts, housing tenders in the province. So I think it's like, it seems that this happened, something happened. So how did we get to this? Yeah.
Look, I think after 1996, the bigger gangs that we've all known, Americans, Hard Living, Sexy Boys, and so forth, they were well organized and well structured, and they had strong leaders that exercised discipline. Prior to the development of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act, what you did see was the decentralization of gangs, where no longer you saw the leader taking responsibility for holding the firearms, for deciding who must die, for doing the business, and so forth. What you did see was certain individuals in the gang being given the responsibility to manage the firearms, to sell firearms, and any commodity that they dealt with. You also had individuals that went into the entertainment sector and industry, and others who were responsible for the assassinations in different communities. So that scenario, with the advent of the vigilante organization PAGAD 1996 to 2002, there was a war on the Cape Flats. We called it the Cape Flats War. And it ended in the murder of about 30 of the senior gang leaders, Bobby Mongrel, Ogat Patterson. A lot of the old gang leaders were decimated in the process. And in the very same process, you had new leaders, youngsters that had emerged. They took control of these gangs and they had nothing to lose. And what happened was, because of this decentralization, they started branches everywhere of their particular gangs. And you also had Assassins for Hire, where young people could be given a firearm, sent from Atlantis to go and kill somebody in Tafelsig, for instance, one of the communities. So there was an evolution. But I think the fourth industrial revolution and the use of this communication equipment changed the dynamics of gangs radically. So information technology assisted greatly in gang members communicating from inside prison and in different communities, and they set themselves up very, very, very well. What also changed was that they were able to recruit police officers to work with them and for them in a more sustained and systemic way. If you look at the current MODAC trial, you will see that they employed technology, information technology, to track police officers, to track their movements through their phones. I mean, the years ahead where our police are still stuck in the 20th century. I think you have younger people helping with ICT development and so forth. What has changed in terms of the activities is that they've graduated to greater criminal degrees in terms of economic activity. You now see extortion as, then we knew about extortion, but you're seeing it more prevalent. Everybody pays tax now. Then you had the old shopkeeper, the corner shopkeeper having to pay, the vegetable hawker having to pay them, the taxi driver having to pay tax. Now it's far more prevalent. Everybody with a spaza shop has to pay. Children going to school must pay. Teachers who teach at school must pay. And so this is similar to what happened in areas in Mexico, in Colombia. Everybody pays. The sicarios made sure of that. What you also see that's different is some international criminals have teamed up with these organized criminals, have teamed up with some of these leaders of these gangs, and they've almost elevated themselves above what we know as street gangs. And they're able to import drugs wholesale. They're able to use Cape Town as a city to transport drugs as a holding area to other parts of the world. And so you now have tenuous links with the Colombian and Mexican mafia, where some of the local gang leaders made deals, and the cocaine washed up in the Neisner area. And the police got it, and the gang leader was killed as a result. So there was a saying, you don't mess with the Colombian mafia and so forth. So I don't think that you're dealing with the gangs, as you say, Sean, of the 70s and 80s and early 90s. What you're having is people that have established their criminal governance, and they've established it well. They perform policing functions. They perform any function that any business organization would be functioning, but in the illicit economy. And that's fundamentally different.